I think the whole topic here is, can a company fire on all 8 cylinders, right? A lot of us have been at companies and you find we're firing on 2 or 3 cylinders, and we all wish that the entire company was operating as a whole, and sometimes it happens. And Marshall, you might remember when we were at Oracle in 88 and 89, I mean, we were doubling every year. Everything was clicking, right? Larry gave us the orders, and we all marched to a single drummer, and everything was great, right? But then a lot of companies we find struggle with that. There are multiple, locations, divisions, political intrigue, and so on and so forth, right? So maybe we can start with you, Marshall. Just explain, how is InvisibleCRM organized today? Let's get how each one of you is organized, and then let's get into the alignment issues.
Okay, first, structurally and organizationally, we're a technology platform provider with a lot of our developers and our CEO in Eastern Europe. A lot of the sales and marketing are currently in the US, and we actually are moving some general administration and IT activities over here. Development, we're probably about 50, 60 people. We're about 80, 85 all told. We've got about 9, 10 people in what I would call sales and marketing and lead generation in the US. We've also got QA, professional services, and support. So that's pretty much how we're organized. Obviously, we do have the time zone difference to deal with. It's one of the major challenges.
And so organization-wise, CEO, and how many people report to the CEO in your company?
CEO has about 3 people reporting to him. There is probably typically 2-level tier management structure. Perhaps in development, we have 3-level. I don't know the exact organizational structure, but that's where the bulk of the organizational hierarchy is, if you will.
When you said Eastern Europe, which country?
We're in the Ukraine. We also have...
that country, okay.
Yeah, we're in the Ukraine, but we have a great relationship, believe it or not, with the other, if you will, Russians that we work with. We have our investors are in Moscow and in Estonia, and we have some developers in St. Petersburg. So obviously, I get a lot of questions from our partners about that, but right now, it's really not affecting at all our activity or our progress.
Great, thanks. Morris, how about you?
Yeah, we're at a little bit earlier stage. We're in the healthcare IT space writ large, so it's been a pretty powerful trend. We largely sell to enterprise customers, people who are using us to make it easier to move diagnostic imaging. So if you ever had a CT scan or an MRI scan, between and among hospitals. So there's a lot of regulatory compliance, and there's a fair amount of, it becomes a relatively high stakes decision for the enterprises that we're selling to. Not unlike Marshall's company, we're heavily biased right now towards development. And we have a very distributed team, not outside of the United States, but within the United States. And I think there's a little bit of a theme, which is in these relatively lean startups, and there's a lot of pressure to be extremely lean and use capital extremely efficiently, particularly at these early stages, because you pay so dearly for it. You tend to have a fairly intense competition for talent. It's extremely hard to find talent, we found, and it's particularly hard to find kind of self-starting talent. And what we found, it's not necessarily, it's almost a personality type of people who are fairly self-sufficient and able to operate on their own. So on the development side, we have a very lean organization where we have a CTO who codes, who's probably spending a ton of time coding, very little management overhead. And I was just talking to one of our developers, and the philosophy is, here's a problem, let's talk about how we're going to solve it, and then a lot of the responsibility rests with you to solve it. And some people find that to be extremely energizing, and some people find it not to be. So we typically have a process where somebody comes on, spends about 6 months trying out effectively, and then either stays or leaves. And the people who stay are extremely, extremely happy. They live all over the place. No one really keeps track of what they do other than the final product. There's no kind of there's relatively frequent, we're on a monthly release cycle, so there's probably code check-ins about every 2 weeks or something like that, a relatively rapid cycle, but there's not a lot of overhead. On the sales and marketing side, which is a much more incipient organization, we've it's been hard to put together a good team, although we're happy with our team now. Very lean structure, and actually here is where the management is the most fluid. I'm sort of nominally head of it, and it's a small group. And one of the things that's been complicated is there's probably room for more management at some point, but you really don't want to have a ton of management overhead because we want people out just trying to generate sales as much as possible. And again, we're really looking for self-starters, and I think we've done a good job there. We've now, and then the last piece that we just recently did is we hired an exceptional young person in New York City who I met through mentoring and then had been at a big bank for a number of years and then left to come join us in sales and marketing. We let him set up a small incubator space in Lower Manhattan. Take space in an incubator, I should say, and that's been good to attract talent. We've actually found that New York City market to be pretty good for attracting talent. So that's our story so far, and I would give us it's hard for me to say anything other than a good grade on alignment. I think it's good, but I think what's tricky in these early startup markets is we get a lot of disparate feedback. So sometimes alignment can be elusive because your customers are driving you in different directions. So 3 salespeople will be coming back with relatively different market feedback, and that's not bad. But you can sometimes have a meeting where it feels like you're all touching a different part of the elephant, and that in and of itself is a little bit tricky because we had one sales guy who said, it's all about the insurance companies, and then another sales guy said, it has nothing to do with insurance companies, and then a third sales guy is saying, it's all about the physician, and by the end of it, you were sort of like, we're going to have to work through this. But that's part of our very particular industry progress, too.
Right. Thanks, Morris. And Shobana, how about you? You just joined Mindflash recently, so as the engineering and technical head. So can you tell us a little bit?
Sure. And I worked at Netflix and Yahoo before Mindflash, okay. And a lot of our learnings, I think, are common irrespective of the size of the company. Mindflash, just real quick in terms of the space it operates, is its target is medium and large enterprise companies. For example, Microsoft, McDonald's, Lufthansa, Yammer are a few of the 1,000+ customers that use us. What it provides is a cloud-hosted learning management platform where you can train your employees, sales, support, or even your customers and handle time and space decoupling, which I personally feel is going to become more and more of the trend with social networking, device explosion, as well as shared economy. So we want to build the training solution for all these use cases. And our team is actually pretty small. It's about 25 people total. So I report to the CEO, and I have 2 peers. One is the VP of Sales and Support, and another is the VP of Product and Marketing. We run a pretty lean organization. So within my team, I have leads and then individual contributors. I'm personally quite involved in code reviews, but also the technology strategy, as in what is the full stack going to look like, how are we going to scale, things like that as well. A lot of the challenges that Morris mentioned from having a distributed team definitely apply to us, so I can relate to a lot of the comments he made. We have developers distributed across the US and from different states across the US, and actually a minority working out of Palo Alto, which is our headquarters. And we have found that it's really important to hire for the talent that can be independent, but also one of the things for us is that everybody understands goals in a very concise fashion. The company's goals, we keep them simple, consistent, and on people's radar all the time. So for example, our office has a monitor which shows how we are trending towards our goal all the time. And this is projected on a tool we use called Sakoko. We started using it recently for office collaboration, and it's been really effective because you can project the goals and all the entire dashboard of how we are trending all the time. And employees can easily derive how their personal work relates to where the company is going. And I feel that that's important to help them make their day-to-day judgment on priorities so that management doesn't have to do it on a day-to-day basis for them. And we tend to hire very senior people, so most of this organization is really a lot of senior people who are independent, who can question assumptions and demand explanation from everyone. So there is no top-down, it's everybody's in it together. That's common for us.
Great. I mean, one of the things, right, all of you, when I hear your stories, you have to deal with internal teams, distributed teams, customers, partners, et cetera, right? And to just kind of continue on, Shobana, your theme of tools. So how do you guys work weekly, or do you have weekly staff meetings? Do you have quarterly goal settings? I mean, can we talk a little bit about best practice in this area, if it can come out of this conversation? Who wants to go first? Don't have to be in order, but go ahead, Marshall.
I'll go first.
Okay.
So it was very interesting topic for our company because we have actually 2 product management meetings a week, one for the folks in Eastern Europe that's got more of a technical bent, and then we have another meeting that's geared towards North America that really is run solely by the senior director and really talks about, if you will, the project status of a variety of the products. And I haven't yet gotten into the details of our product technology, but we pretty much work in customizing our product for our OEM partners. So our sales team, our marketing team, our senior sales executives are very interested in what the status is, what the milestones are, because they're dealing, and I myself am dealing with these partners and even customers who are looking for a new version. We have a North American sold weekly meeting. We do that just because we're a lot in different parts of the U.S., mostly on the West Coast, but different cities. And it's a small company, and we really need to know what each of us is doing. And then finally, we have a typical sales pipeline meeting where we each go over our pipeline and what issues can be addressed. And we have the CEO, the COO, and obviously our Senior VP of Worldwide Sales Operations on that. So we're really focused every week. And it's more than just a meeting. Obviously, it's a small company too, particularly on sales and marketing. We're getting updates, requests for status checks almost daily.
Morris?
So we have we have a weekly meeting where we talk about pipeline and sales and marketing challenges. So we do that once a week. And then after that, the meetings are a little bit more ad hoc. We find that the engineers will typically collaborate fairly organically. And once they're kind of driven in a particular direction, they have their own, often asynchronous way of communicating. And then every once in a while, we'll bring people together when it feels appropriate. It's kind of a different, I don't know if you ever feel this, but it's a different kind of communication pattern. And one of the things we like to do for engineers is often incorporate them either into a sales process periodically or into a trade show periodically, because that's a good way to kind of energize them. And our engineers like nothing better than having their stuff be sold, they don't care as much about. They want it to be used. Nothing makes them happier than to feel that stuff is being used. On the sales and marketing side, we tend to have, it's very important that our customer-facing people are interacting with our salespeople. That's probably the most important thing, because for us, what's driving down, and our cost of customer acquisition probably dropped, it's going down dramatically compared to the lifetime value of customers. And one of the things that's contributing to that is organic expansion within accounts. So if we sell to a larger enterprise account, it is extremely important that we have support and customer management interacting with sales, because half the time they'll get a lead, half the time they'll get an earful that says, it's not working, and that's normal. I mean, when software gets out, people's experience, that's what you need. You need that feedback, and then we fix it and move forward, and then it turns into another opportunity within the organization or within an affiliated organization. So that's probably our biggest. I think a lot of what Marshall said is right on, but for us, the biggest thing we do is push our support and sales people together probably more than you would ordinarily, because that organic growth is so important to us.
So Shobana, can you expand on this tool you talked about and what that means? And also, that seems like it's more electronic communication, but what about the physical communication between the teams?
Sure. Let me start with the tool, and maybe I can also talk about the rest of the broader communication. So Coco's a tool we started using probably a couple of months ago. And it really does office simulation. For example, going into somebody's office and closing a door, for example, or turning your camera on so both of you can see each other, whether it's a one-on-one or a group meeting, all of you can turn your cameras on. So you can actually watch the body language, wonder if people are understanding what you're saying or clarify. You feel like it's a real meeting room, and these are all just a click away. So the barrier to doing that is very low. So normally we'll find that as humans, if people are remote, we tend to just do a phone call. But this one, just making them one mouse click away, it makes it really easy. So our daily scrums, for those of you who are familiar with the Agile process, we have daily short 10-minute meetings where everybody shares an update for the day. Everybody turns their cameras on all the time without reminders because it's so easy. And you can actually see what the team is feeling about something we're announcing it because it's all on one screen. And that's been very, very effective for us because I feel like verbal communication is as important as body language, especially when managing a majority of your team that's remote. So I think that's been a key part of all of us being connected, especially cross-functionally, our sales, support, and engineering. The other part, just taking a step back on communications, I feel there are 3 angles to communication. One is your internal cross-functional within the company. The second is outbound towards the customers. And the third piece, which I think is becoming increasingly important, is engaging with the developer community, be it open source or be it going to meetups or sharing your own technology in meetups. I feel like there is this 3-pronged approach we have to be conscious about. So in terms of internal communication, in addition to the Sakoko and the daily quick sync-ups, where everybody, including the CEO, actually attends, we also have weekly what we call bagel meetings. They're on Friday mornings, and we actually literally have bagels together while we're having the meeting. This includes a business update, any new technology update, feedback on how our customers are using our features, or it can include other special topics based on what we finished that week. Outbound communications to customers, we have weekly webinars where we talk about new features that we have just done, do a demo, or talk to them about features that are coming up. In addition, we're also starting to do periodic meetups on our campus for people who are also welcome to give talks, but we talk about our technology as well as our vision and a product update as well. So these are the different forms of communication we've been using.
So I want to get all of you in the audience engaged as well. So if you have a story to relate to this, feel free to stand up and tell us about it, or any questions for the audience. And fair warning, my friend Bill McNee is in the back there. He's going to be actively involved. I want him to start with the first question. I told him he's going to break the ice. Go ahead, Bill.
I've heard a lot about alignment in communication with your customers. I heard a lot about internal alignment. What are you doing to help align priorities in association with your clients and key prospects?
So Bill, I think that is actually probably what drives our sales and marketing effort right now. So that's why right now it's extremely important for us to set up both we have weekly touch point meetings with our customers, which maybe is a little bit unusual, but our customers sort of have that cadence internally. And we have sales, marketing, technology all involved in those conversations because it's you could argue maybe a little bit too much driving our roadmap right now because we're, we sell to enterprise, and you get as a smaller company a little beholden to enterprise, so we have to be careful about that. But we definitely, on our significant customers, are on a weekly cadence with them where it becomes a significant priority for them, and they will often have a dedicated person who is engaged with it. We're also part of our customers' broader outreach. The business of medicine right now is changing dramatically, and our tool is not just makes healthcare better, but it also helps from a business angle. So we have institutions that we provide services to who develop their own internal sales team to push out their services based on our tool. So we have to be super aligned with what they're doing and be able to make sure that they don't have issues. And we literally have a whole, that's where we're most structured. So I have meetings with the CIO or the CFO or even sometimes the CEO, and then we have a tiered set of meetings like that. So it's a great question. It's a big focus of what we do in terms of meetings. We're less, our internal meetings we try to keep to a minimum. Those have a little bit different valence.
Shobana, with your tool that you use, your collaboration tool, what's the name again?
Sikoko.
Sikoko, okay. So do you use that to have the same kind of camera option with your customers, that they can meet your team? I mean, what do you do there?
We haven't tried that so far. As I said, we just started using it a couple of months ago. Also, it needs the Sikoko client to be installed by the other side. But in terms of customer communication, we have a couple of things we do. One is the webinars I talked about, which are weekly, which is open to all customers as well as interested prospects. And we have just started rolling periodic meetups, which again, prospects and customers are welcome to join. The third thing which I thought was interesting that Mindflash did is we have a shared support model where everybody is involved in actually actively supporting the customer, including engineering. So as an engineer or an engineering person, I can actually take a case in Zendesk, which is a system we use for customer support, and I can see all the notes from everyone else who has worked with this customer all in one place. So it gives me context on what the history of the customer has been, or what's the pulse. For example, if they're having an issue and they're starting to get upset about it, it's easy to see it all in one place and really give the customer the attention they need. For our most engaged customers, we have a dedicated what we call CSM, or Customer Success Manager, who actually periodically checks in with them to see how they're doing. So it's more an outreach versus just an inbound support. And these are the main things we do for customers. And we are looking to start this concept of a customer advisory board where some of our most engaged customers can meet with us periodically and help influence our roadmap from a feature needs and where the future of online training is going.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Sure.
So do you find it, when I was at OpenAir, we used to have everybody on the support line, and engineers would jump in, and then we kind of moved away from it a little bit because it became very interrupt-driven. You know, it just was distracting. So I'm curious how you feel it works with an engineering team. We now centralize feedback a little bit, and not that we're trying to keep anything away from people, but we try to tier it out a little bit, because sometimes until you interpret it, a customer can ask a support question that sometimes an engineer out of context will dive super deeply on, and that may not be the exact right way to go. So I'm just curious your impressions.
That's an excellent question. And interrupt-drivenness, I think, especially for engineering, is a challenge. I've actually even heard a developer say, each time you interrupt me, you've introduced a bug in my code, right? And what we do is we set aside 2 people whom we call triage team. In every sprint is what we call it. We do monthly releases. For those of you familiar with Agile terminology, sprint is just a cadence. So it's a bunch of things you plan to do, and then at the end of what we call the sprint, you release them, and you go to the next sprint. So we identify 2 people who are on the triage team and 3 who we call the escalation team. And it's usually these team members who are engaged in support for that month. So in a way, we plan for them to be distracted, so we are cautious about how much work we take up for those people. But the rest of the team is not engaged at that time, but it goes on a rotation, so everybody gets to play that role.
Got it.
Marshall?
Yeah, I just want to add that our company has primarily an OEM business model. So when Bill brought up customer alignment, I immediately thought of 2 customers. One is our OEM partner, which is a big strategic customer for ours, but also the end user customers. So on the end user customer side, you know, our technology gets customized for the individual OEM partners. And then inevitably with deployment, there's always a custom situation. We haven't gotten into the specifics of our product, but we allow essentially CRM customers to run their application within an office productivity application, most notably Microsoft Outlook or Lotus Notes, and we're evolving it to much more of a cloud-based solution in the next few months. But to get on point, there is an inevitable amount of professional services that need to be provided to that customer. So we work in a sales situation where we actually involve what we call a proof of concept sales consultant to make sure that not only can we deliver the functionality the customer is expecting, but also the business value. So there is both a technical justification and a business justification. And we work through the implementation, and we do provide support services because, as you can imagine, with any enterprise application deployment, over time there's constant evolution, changing, adding business rules, et cetera. So that ensures the alignment through a service contract and professional services. On the partner side, we do have, in my particular engaging, I involve product management early. It's a fairly technical discussion about making sure our APIs and the partners' APIs can align, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. We have to build extensions. And then that project, from a technical product standpoint, is managed by a project manager, and we do set milestones of functional achievement. And I think we're pretty good at that, and we pretty much have great satisfaction, has developed our reputation. I handle more of the business side, which would be not only the structure of the OEM deals, but also the business model that the partner uses for deployment. So it isn't just the royalty structure, but how the sales force is trained, and if need be, how they engage with us. So it's a fairly complex test, to be honest with you, but we are adding resources to make that more fluid. Our goal is to make sure that the partner is successful with our technology deployment.
So just a follow-up to all of you on that question is, I've not heard yet the use of social media in your communications and alignment strategies. Can we talk a little bit about how you guys use social media?
Internally?
Internally and externally, both. Right?
We have, I wouldn't call it social media from a sales and marketing standpoint, but we have, if you will, the usage of Skype, WebEx conferencing, Dropbox. We have an internal, I don't know if you've heard of the technology called Confluence. It's an internal product management tool. And we have the ability to go in there, but we don't really communicate that way. We can reference an update in an email and then reference one of those social or collaborative sites.
But are you using Yammer, Jive, Chatter, any of that type of stuff?
Internally, no.
Internally, no. Okay. How about you, Morris?
Not internally. We're pretty small, but we do have a pretty big focus, I would say, on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And interestingly, and I'm sure there's some like massive violation of privacy and all this, but all of our sales and support and everybody sort of gave access to our marketing team to their LinkedIn and Twitter accounts. And that's part of what we manage centrally, which I do find a little bit strange, but people wanted that to happen because they think it is actually a huge benefit to have, on top of your own communications, to be able to have consistent messaging across the company. And it turns out to be a very positive way to build interest and capacity. And we deliberately sort of manage LinkedIn groups and make sure everybody's in the right LinkedIn groups. And it turns out to be there's vigorous virtual social communities of professionals. And that communication is extraordinarily important to us. So we really want to stay on top of that. And you do it yourself, but we also centralize that function, and people have access to these accounts, which I guess is weird, but because it's sort of one of these things where allegedly people use their LinkedIn accounts to be always sort of surfing around to find new opportunities for themselves individually. But it really is so important to their persona within what they're doing that they all ask for that assistance. We didn't compel anybody. They all kind of were happy to have that extra assistance on managing that presence online.
Morris, let's talk offline about taking over my Twitter handle as well. Shobana, how about you?
Mindflash has a Twitter account, so any key updates on the product gets posted there. We use LinkedIn quite a bit as well. So we do a lot of team likes each other's posts as well when there are updates. We have a developer blog, and we share updates when there are key technology changes. For example, recently we implemented behavioral recognition in partnership with Senshin. So for example, if you have a course for say 5,000 people, it can give you feedback on the portion of your course where most of the people appear distracted or they spent a lot of time. So you can actually go back and make your course more effective for the next set of people. And that technology was something we wanted to share with the community about. So the developer wrote up a blog, and then we all shared it on our Twitter and LinkedIn accounts. So that's a very common thing the team does as a culture. We also contribute to open source when we participate in meetups as well as trade shows to share any key updates. We do that as well. Internally, interestingly, we use Yammer quite a bit. And that, I feel, has helped us with what I would call data transparency. For example, if there's a tricky issue for a customer and it gets yammed, pretty much everybody jumps in and helps the support person with tips within minutes. So Yammer has been very effective for us in terms of that efficiency of communication. And we also use it for team building. Everybody shares photographs or even wedding pictures. One of our team members got married recently. So with a remote team, even such things matter to keep the team motivated and aligned, I think.
Any other questions? Yeah, I see lots of questions here. Let's take the one up here first. Oh, there's a microphone, sir.
Hi, I have a question for the moderator as well as for the panel. So we're a startup and we're located down in Santa Barbara, and our big problem these days is getting engineers. And they're hard to find in Santa Barbara and harder to find up north. So how does I'll start with the moderator, how does he feel from Sandhill's perspective about having virtual developers software either around the world or in somewhere outside of their home base? And then also to the panel, same question is, if you're now backed by a VC, how do they feel about your own personal experience about that same situation? Because for years it was like, no, team has to be here local, so on and so forth, and that's almost become impossible.
Good question. We just did a CEO, CFO survey for 2014, and it's on sandhill.com. You can read the article. The biggest challenge for companies this year as they grow was the war for talent. And so we had a webinar as well with CEOs and CFOs. And the main thing that came out was they were looking at different models of development now because of the war for talent. So even companies in the Bay Area were looking at multiple locations in the Bay Area. So they were based in Palo Alto. They were also looking at a city office because a lot of people in the city don't want to go down to Palo Alto anymore and vice versa, right? So there was both a distributed model even within the Bay Area that was developing between many companies out there as a new trend. And the second one was also the onshore, offshore model. And that was also dispersing not just between the US and India, but Eastern Europe and crossing time zones. So all those things are happening to accommodate this war for talent. So I think if you're in Santa Barbara, my advice would be, see if you can have an off location here in the Bay Area as well and kind of supplement that as opposed to trying to attract talent to Santa Barbara. So you guys are probably running companies and you could add more as well.
We actually have 3 engineers working out of Santa Barbara, although we're based out of
Maybe
Palo
you can
Alto.
swap teams.
I know, exactly. But you're right, it's extremely competitive to hire, even if you're an established company, as I've seen when I was at bigger companies than this.
So are you venture funded, Mindflash?
We are.
Okay, so do your VCs help with this process of recruiting and those, or what do they do?
They do help us in terms of showcasing us at different places. But I think for us, we do have a dedicated recruiter, very, very experienced person. But what I've personally found is that you should not be shy of reaching out to people anywhere. But it's really important for the candidate to feel like they're really connected with you, even if it's an email exchange, even if it's a 5-minute call. Because if they're trying to pick between, say, 2 or 3 jobs, and even if you're a smaller company with even a lower pay, I think it's really important to get the point across on what is it that distinguishes you in this role. Maybe we are a startup with work-life balance, which is a unique thing, and you'll get that when you work here. So what is that elevator pitch? I think it's really important to make that person feel like preferring you over other companies right from the first conversation. And then as long as the rest of the work works out, as in I'm interested in this technology and so on, usually they'll prefer you over the other companies, I feel.
Morris, how about you?
I think that's well said. We have been fortunate in talent acquisition, but it has been based on a very laissez-faire notion of where you work and how you want to work. It's really been very empowering. So one of the best people we got, or I shouldn't say that, we have wonderful people. A recent good person that we got that you wouldn't necessarily think, Cambridge-trained mathematician, great, really fantastic, needed sort of some flexibility around how they were going to do things, and it was fine for us, and I think that was not necessarily true. Some people were not as willing to take the risk on that and have people less structured. And we also have a pretty rigorous set the expectation of we have no idea whether you'll work out or not, because I think it's extremely hard to judge coding talent in advance, and it's very contextual. So I think it takes about 6 months, and if it works, and if it doesn't, you just have to understand that's part of the deal, and people, I think, are receptive to that, and we've been successful with it.
Yeah, I just want to lever what Morris said, 'cause it's a very, very similar situation, but the inverse, where we have our development team in Eastern Europe, mostly in the Ukraine. And our challenge is we have a lot of very good technical people, and they're very good coders, but they're not as experienced in developing, if you will, a product. They're very good at coding, and maybe they have come from previous system integrators or have just done specific projects and never worked on a timeline of making code well documented and the ability to version a product. So we have a similar kind of cycle that I've learned through our CEO, that we'll bring in people, a lot of people, but we actually anticipate our turnover of about 30-35%, because we can judge during the first anywhere from 2 to 6 months whether or not they're the right fit. We are a company in transition, as most small companies are. We are trying to make our product more productizable, and we need that skill set. The other thing I would add is, and I alluded to, is that we need, if you will, more traditional product management in our company. And we've had discussions with the CEO about bringing in a product manager who actually resides in North America. So obviously there's some specific criteria. They would have to be familiar with the language and the culture, possibly be able to travel every few months into Eastern Europe, but also be good in communication and positioning of the product, not only to us as sales and marketing people, but to partner prospects and customer prospects, which we don't have on the technical side at this point.
Question back there?
I got a mic over here already.
Oh, the mic's over here. Sorry, I'll get to you next. Go ahead.
So I've got a question around the run-up to software releases. As you run up to a software release, how do you coordinate things between, say, finance and legal, who might have to have contracts signed for partner integrations, the operations team, the training team? We find frequently in the software business that you release a product and then training goes, well, we didn't know that was in there, and customers are calling for support, and support goes, well, I'm sorry, I don't have the information on that.
Who wants to take that one? So let's keep these answers brief and let one of you talk, because we got more questions. So who wants to take this question?
I can
Okay,
share what we
go
do.
ahead.
So for us, it's ensuring that everybody is on the same, what we call the Scrum cadence. So it is truly cross-functional, sales and support, and everybody knows what we are planning to do in the next month. And they all sit in during the sprint demos, which are done at the end of the sprint. And they get through each of the features, get to ask questions, and ask about what if this doesn't work, how do you handle it? In terms of third parties, we are on the first day of what I'm calling the sprint. It's a monthly cycle. We think about what are the third-party dependencies we have. What do we need to communicate to them? And whenever we have external factors or unknowns, we get started the very first week. And that's helped us sort of manage the overall dependencies and risks and make sure everybody is on the same page.
Great. Question back there, sir. I'll get to you next. Yeah.
So this might be more for a targeted question to Morris, but just for some quick background so I can frame up my question. I ran a SaaS company for about 12 years, and we experienced several cultural implosions over the growth period. And the thing that you learn real quick about engineers and developers, if you lose one that's highly respected, others are soon to follow. And over the years, as we matured, we were all physically in one location because I resisted the remote aspect of the teams for this reason. And you can get into a cadence to the point where you're so in tune, you walk down the hall and you'll immediately know if something's off. So the core of my question is, now that competition is so high for these resources and you have all these remote teams, how in the hell do you stay ahead of morale issues and get into tune when there's something that might be off?
So it's a great question, and we actually, this sort of very close to home. We had a young developer who very good developer, awesome developer, one of our, really a star, and effectively had kind of a little cultural implosion around it. And we had to, and it was stressful because you're a little team, and we didn't know whether when he left would not only we lose a lot of elements of this, but what was really interesting was we got wind of it, and then the first thing we did, even though we're remote, is I flew out and had dinner with this individual, sat down and said, here's what the issues are. We then brought the team together, and then he ended up leaving, but left with a consulting contract from one of our customers to help deploy some of our, it was a fantastic end, and I still consider him a friend and a friend of the company, and it was great for everybody. But we were very proactive in that case and actually had to have the uncomfortable conversation. I mean, I was at dinner and sort of saying, here's what people are saying, here's what he's saying, here's what I feel. You just had to be very aggressive about it.
Question down here.
Yeah, there's a new trend with recruiting with new technologies out there. There's a new plethora of new technologies. So I'll be asking you in a second, just to address any new technologies that you're using, these new recruiting technologies, and also for everybody that's interested in learning more about that space, the MIT Stanford VLab group at Stanford is having an event on June 19th for these new recruiting technologies. So
cool.
Thanks.
Marshall, do you want to talk about recruiting? What do you use? How do you get people?
Well, I'm not actually involved in recruiting of developers, but I do know that our CTO in Eastern Europe is involved in learning. He's a very technical person. He's got like a PhD from one of those universities back there. And we are looking at some newer technologies, but I really can't share much, honestly.
Anybody else on the recruiting technology side? Are you using certain products, platforms?
We probably should be, so maybe we'll go to that conference because we've been doing it a little bit more ad hoc.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. You, sir. Okay.
Sorry, thank
and
you.
I'll get to you next.
It's more comments to the previous question on the war for talent. I actually, a couple of years ago, I acquired a software company that I think had the best practice in starting to learn how to work offshore. And they did something similar to what you're doing, which is that they started with a location about 1 to 2 hours from their original development location and put 5 developers there. They did that for 1 year, and they used sprints like you do and all of that until they were 100% happy with the processes they had implemented and the fact that their developers could work in remote locations. And whenever there was an issue in the first year, they just drove out to each other, worked it out on the whiteboard, and once they had that process completely perfect, then they moved to development in the Ukraine and some other locations. And I acquired the company on behalf of a larger company, and we actually turned that into a best practice, which really worked well. That every time we had a scalability problem from an engineering perspective, we just rented an office about 1 to 2 hours from the location of the developers. We put 5 developers there, made sure that everyone understood how to work in that environment, in a remote environment. And once that worked, we closed that office, brought the engineers back, and opened an office for remote development in Ukraine or anywhere in Eastern Europe or in Asia. Great. So just a comment to the earlier question.
Thank you. Last question, if you could keep it brief, we're running out of time.
Okay. That's it. Just kidding.
Go ahead.
Just a fun question, actually, I'm neither a sociologist or an anthropologist, but maybe a fun question to all 3 of you, which is, Shobana, you mentioned culture, and there was a cultural implosion, I believe, Morris was mentioning, et cetera. So I'd like to understand whether you are, what is fundamentally, what is the social construct that you're operating on as a company? I mean, are you like a Montessori school, and are you like a high school? Are you like a tribe? I mean, what is your underlying cultural fabric that you're not imposing, but developing within your company?
Great. Want to start? Are you Montessori?
So I think for us, 2 things. I think just data transparency, and let me give a quick example. Code reviews go to everybody. So people should be willing to throw open their code to the rest of the company, throw open what they do. So that's a big part of our culture. And the second is just step up and fill the gap. There is no, if this had happened, this could have happened. I had this dependency on X. And I feel those 2 define our culture fundamentally. So then that makes accountability easier. It's easy to make mistakes, recover, and iterate, versus trying to do a bunch of postmortem on what went wrong and so on. So people are willing to have that transparency a bit more easily.
Morris?
I would echo that, but put it in the context of, I saw a great PowerPoint a couple of years back from Netflix that talked about what is the structure of motivation, and they talked about a team, a sports team, not in the context of we're all buddies. It's like you don't have to like everybody. But you do have to respect everybody, and then you have to understand that you want the best person in the best position in order to accomplish the mission. And if you have that attitude, I think it creates motivation and an understanding of what the goal is, which is that the whole team wins, and that you need to be able to fit into that in the best way possible.
Marshall, you got the last word?
Yeah, I just want to say that if I understand the question and reflected on my company, if you look back 9 months ago, our company was predominantly in Eastern Europe, and we had maybe 2 or 3 sales and pre-sales folks, and now we have 3 or 4 CXO types, of which 2 are in the US. So we're in transition, and I would say culturally, we have that development team in the Ukraine, and we have a growing presence and I'll call it a growing dominance influence in North America on the overall direction of the company. So ultimately, this integration and this coalescence resides with the CEO, and he understands it. I'm not going to say this problem is solved, but it does take time, and we are making changes. You know, we expect the CEO to be out here and to move to the West Coast. We expect 1 or 2 of the professional services and more of the outwardly project managers to be out here. And we're going to wind up having more of a balanced culture between the 2 groups. And I think the development team is pretty excited because they are looking to, just like you said, they enjoy when their product is being used. And we're getting into a pure cloud-based technology, and they're very, very excited to be part of that, if you will, revolution or big wave of adoption that they feel the North American sales and marketing team can enable for them.
Great. That's cool.
Thank you. You guys have been a terrific panelists, and you guys have been a terrific audience. So thank you, everyone.
Right.